Welcome. I'm sure you're all very curious. We've kept the secret hidden pretty well. We have a special speaker this morning, and it is my great privilege and honor to bring up my wife, Kazia. Are you ready? She has a lot of stuff.
Hello? Oh, okay. Well, hello, friends. Up until 2 minutes ago, I was not nervous. And all week, I was like, Kazia, why aren't you nervous? You do not like public speaking. And then I kind of figured, some of you don't know, I'm a swing dancer. I've been dancing since 2018. And it turns out that when you do a choreography wrong in front of 300, 400 people, not much after that scares you. And we're not talking like, oh, I missed a step wrong. We're talking 32 beats wrong. Yes. Ooh. Yeah, check in. You're awake. I've had a coffee, so I'm feeling good. I'm only allowed one coffee a day, so now I'm drinking tea. But in that 32 beats, where my partner and I are like, oh, you keep smiling. People don't know you mess up unless you make the face, right? And we're doing our dance, and she's like, okay, should we do it wrong again in the same spot? And I'm like, yeah, we should, because then it becomes intentional, right? If we're up front and we're doing something completely different than the two people behind you, they don't know that you've messed up because you do it twice. And so I kind of figure from that, nothing really else can go that wrong. But wait, unless, maybe I drop something, but that's also fine. Oh, I can also see myself. I don't like that. That's fine. That also means that my screen has changed again and I don't know how to put it back. Oh. There we go. Okay, we're great. So, Pastor Lance asked me to speak after we went to district conference, and it was great because, in my opinion, I got to go to all of the better breakout sessions, and I took my duty of note taker very seriously, and so people would ask me what do you do? And I would always respond, oh, I'm the supportive wife and the note taker. And they seem to get a kick out of that. A couple other questions that I was asked while at district was, do you have any kids? And I got 2 responses. Oh, don't worry, it'll happen. And, good for you. And then someone asked me, what did I think of being a pastor's wife? And my response was, you know what? It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Thank you. Because that was the one thing I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be a pastor's wife because I was afraid of the expectations that people would put on me and that I would not be able to meet them. And it's funny because all the pastors' wives that I knew didn't meet this description that I had come up with. It was someone who loved working with kids, who would drop everything to, show up and cook something. I make 3 things. I make soup, I make chicken pot pie, and I make pancakes, and Matthew doesn't like pancakes. So therefore, I make 2 things. Yet again, another potluck where I have forgotten to bring something. Oh, and bread. I make bread. And I feel like I did not fit the role of pastor's wife. Oh, and I make coffee. I make really good coffee. Um, that's my day job, is a barista, coffee maker, coffee roaster. Um, and of course, because God has a sense of humor, I married Matthew, who has the biggest pastor's heart ever. A little gruff and prickly on the outside, but like very soft on the inside. You throw a kid in front of him, and he's a totally different person. And I always tell my friends, particularly my dancing friends who don't know Matthew very well, like you gotta meet him when he's at church. You see me at dance in my element, you need to see him at church in his element. And so now I'm going to ask you to do something that everyone hates in a congregation, is I would like you to turn to your neighbor and tell them who discipled you and how did they do it. You get 2 minutes. Maybe. Okay. Thank you. And the reason why I say the thing that everyone hates doing is because when I'm sitting in my seat, usually either alone or beside Matthew, and someone says, okay, turn to your neighbor and do, X, I'm like, oh, but I don't want to. That's uncomfortable. I don't want to be uncomfortable. And yet, discipleship is uncomfortable. And so we need to take these moments of discomfort and realize, okay, it's not about me, it's about God. And half the time, honestly, it doesn't even matter what I do because I can't change the other person. I can't control what they're going to think of me or what they think of what I'm saying. But God can, and God can use me as a vessel, regardless of how poorly I think I'm doing. And let's face it, half the time, I feel like I'm doing a terrible job. I was not given the blessing of eloquent words. You throw a paintbrush in my hand or a camera, I lose all fear. Are you kidding? I will climb that ladder. I will get the shot. I will paint the thing. But to tell someone my faith, terrifying. Terrifying. I would rather do anything else because I am afraid of what their pushback onto me is, even though that's not the point. The point isn't my discomfort, it's their opportunity. And so I ask you about how someone discipled you, because I had a very, I don't want to say lucky, very intentional person in my life who discipled me when I was about 16. So it was my then youth leader and still friend, Amanda, and she ran a small girls' Bible study that would happen Friday nights before youth. And it was more than just we show up, we read our devotional, and we hang out. Amanda opened up her lives to us girls. There was 5 of us who went regularly, but it ranged between 3 and 9, depending on who showed up. And at the time, I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, this is neat. You know, like, we're going to go to Amanda's house, we're going to make bannock, we're going to go to the gym, we're just going to, like, hang out, be friends. And looking at it now, she made a huge sacrifice in her time and in her life to, like, bring us alongside of her and really minister to us in ways that, like, at 16, you don't understand. You don't think it's a big deal that someone's like, oh, yeah, like, I'll drive out of my way to pick you up to bring you into church because you can't drive yet and your family doesn't go to church. And I just thought, like, you know, like, that's nice. She's doing it because, like, a little bit of, like, I feel like she has to. Like, she's my youth leader. She is supposed to present these opportunities to me. But also a little bit of, like, Amanda sees me as her friend. And so I was ignorant of the fact that she was intentionally working in my life. There was also a time a little bit later when Matthew and I were already dating, and Jason had the great idea of, Kazia, we're going to hold a small Bible study in your house, and you're going to lead worship. I learned so much. I also learned that when someone says, hey, find camp songs that we can sing, he doesn't actually mean look up Christian camp songs and learn them. He means the songs that, like, everyone already knows. So I came up with some real weird songs that nobody knew, and it didn't work very well. And that was the last time I ever led worship. I'm also not good. Let's make that very clear. I am not good. Okay? Don't come to me after this and be like, Kazia. No. The answer is no. But I bring these up because how are you rubbing off on the people around you? Are you being intentional with the relationships that you have in your life? I had a couple very well-meaning ladies in our church who at one point was like, hey, Kazia, like, you know, I'm here to support you in whatever you need. But they didn't have any follow-through. And as an adult, I now recognize, it's because they were busy and they had their lives going on, and, you know, fill in the blank X, Y, Z of what excuse you can have to, like, not make time to hang out with this 16-year-old kid. But at the time, when, you know, things were a little rocky at home, I kind of just felt like these people were someone else who was letting me down again. And so when you make that commitment to disciple someone, it has to be that commitment, because it's those broken relationships that do more damage than not even saying something to someone. And it's hard to make yourself available to someone like that and recognize, like, am I lifting them up? Am I challenging them? Am I supporting them? But how you interact with others is a reflection of you and your faith. And it's something I have to remind myself all the time when I don't want to show up or I don't want to be present. And I really, really don't want to take the time to get to know somebody new because I'm already so tired of all the stuff that I'm already doing. But that's something that we're called to do. And we can also take comfort in the fact that Jesus tells us to give him our burdens and to rest in his presence and to take that time to be intentional in your own faith so that you can pour out to others. There we go. So why is discipleship important? The simple answer is because Jesus said so. But that's a cop-out answer because that's just being like, oh, well, the Bible says. Okay, well, the Bible says a lot of things and you need to understand it. So Jesus said to go and make disciples. Matthew 28:16-20. Did I write it down? It's not in my slide. Hold up, I think it is. I think I just have it in the wrong spot. Come here. Okay. Hello? No, I have a copy here. I think I have it on the slide, but now my slideshow's not moving. Ooh, stop. Okay. This is also why I don't do tech stuff. Like, don't ask me. Oh, I have James. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't write down Matthew. Well, that's okay. You all have your Bibles, so you're fine. You're fine. So it was Matthew 28, 16 to 20. What is going on? Thanks. Thank you. So now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age." He didn't say, go and build a church. He didn't ask them to go build a building. He asked them to go and find people. The church is a result of discipleship. Eventually, you get enough people, well, you need somewhere to put them. It's also kind of like the saying, feed them and they will come. It's kind of how it was in our youth group. You know, you're never going to skip pizza night. Come on, you know it's going to be better than whatever you're eating at home sometimes. So if we're told this, why don't we do it? Most of the time, in my opinion, it's because we are afraid. And there's several reasons why we're afraid. Part of it is lack of experience. If you haven't had an experience of being discipled, how are you supposed to disciple somebody else, right? It's kind of like I can teach a dance class because I have been in a dance class. No, and I'm not going to say what I was going to say next. He has been in a dance class. He did a 9-week Viennese waltz class with me, and it was the most lovely 9 weeks. I have never been stepped on more in my entire 7 years of dancing than those 9 weeks. But to his credit, one of my swing dance friends was in there, and she's like, "Kazia, it's your fault. All of your Lindy Hop habits are making you a bad waltzer." So we'll leave that there. The next one is lack of training. Oftentimes we learn things, right? We're great at studying, great at watching a YouTube video, reading a book, gaining all of this lovely head knowledge, implementing none of it. And again, it's hard to disciple someone if you don't have that practical experience. Again, I can teach a dance class because somebody said, "Hey, Kazia, this is how you teach a dance class. This is how you get your class's attention. Here are different things that you can do." And so it's great when you're like, well, I kind of want to disciple someone, but I don't really know what I'm doing. To be able to go to someone and be like, "Hey, like, how do I do this?" Or even better, you train wreck it. You do it with 2 people, and you're like, "Hey, we're just gonna figure this out." Train wrecking it is another dance example. We'll show a move, and we're like, "This is how you do an inside turn." Okay, now you try, and if you do it super wrong, we'll correct you. And sometimes I think you have to do that. You have to be upfront about it and be like, "Hey, so I've never worked with someone like this before. I'm probably going to do stuff wrong," because people appreciate the transparency and also the vulnerability to be like, "Hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a little afraid. I'm probably going to be wrong." Rather than showing up and being like, "Yes, I am a queen of everything. I know exactly what I'm doing. We're not going to make any mistakes here." At least that I'm really good at being like, "I don't know what I'm doing. We're just going to wing it." The next thing is that sometimes we lack the metrics. Like, what are you measuring? How does one even measure discipleship? And if we don't know what we're measuring or how to measure it, how are you supposed to even have that realization and awareness of it? And the other thing is, do our values match what we're measuring? That's intrinsically what we do, right? I really value knowledge and reading, and so I keep track of how many books I read. I keep track of, like, have I learned anything today? Has God spoken to me recently? What am I learning? But that's because I value it. If I didn't value that, well, I'm not, who cares how many books you read? For the record, I've read 51 this year. Thank you. Thank you. And the other thing is lack of definition. If you can't define it, how are you going to do it? How are you going to measure it if you don't understand what you're trying to do? And it's hard to prioritize something if you only have a vague idea. If I'm like, okay, I want to become a better dancer. Okay, well, what does that mean? What kind of dance am I doing? How am I going to practice that? If I'm like, okay, I want to be a better dancer, but all I do is the Macarena. Sure, that's cool. I'll be an excellent Macarena dancer, but that's not going to make me any better in the dance that I actually do, of swing dance. And here's my one rabbit trail, Dwayne. I have no other rabbit trails. It's because the beauty of swing dance is that it's this really freeing, fun dance where, like, at the end of the day, what you do doesn't actually matter. So if I become like world champion Macarena dancer, I can throw that into my Lindy Hop, and it will be cool, and people will look on me on the dance floor and be like, yeah, she's cool. Okay, moving on from that. Definition. So, what is a disciple? A disciple is a lifelong learner. A student is someone who learns something. They learn what the rabbi knows. The disciple is to be who the rabbi is. And remember, rabbi means teacher. So I can go to, my friend's physics class and learn all about some cool physics thing that he does. That doesn't make me a physicist. If I were to practice under him and learn from him and practice what he does, then I could become a physicist. You also cannot accidentally disciple someone. That's very key. It is an intentional relationship. Just as we are intentional about our relationship with God, we need to be intentional with the relationships around us. And understand that you will make mistakes. You will have a hard time. But it's more important to enter in this messy relationship and figure it out than never do it and like worry about being the perfect mentor. Like, I'll do it when, fill in whatever blank you want. I'll do it when I feel I am perfect and ready to do it. Because if you wait for that, you're never going to do it. You're never going to do anything if you wait for that. Which is something I need to remind myself every freaking day. Not that I have that perfectionist bone in me. I don't care that much. But I do use the excuse of, I'll do it when, whatever, when I feel right, when the wind changes the way I want it to, when the people in my life show up how I expect them to, without telling them my expectations. It is the difference between being a believer of Jesus or a follower of Jesus, because even the demons believed in him, but they aren't following him. This is the one I wrote down. James 2:14-26. What does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus, also faith by itself does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith, and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that there is one God. You do well. Even the demons believe and tremble. But do you want to know, O foolish man, that faith without works is dead? Was it not Abraham, our father, justified by works when he offered Isaac, his son, on the altar? Do you see the faith that was working together with his works, and by works faith was made perfect? And the scripture was fulfilled, which said, Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. And he was called the friend of God. You see then that a man is justified by works, and not by faith only. Likewise, was Rahab the harlot also justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out another way? For the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. Oh, I had all these and I didn't skip it. Well, there you go. You all have Bibles. You're fine. And so we take that, and you're like, okay, I now feel like I kind of know what I want to do. I'm feeling a little bit more secure in entering this messy relationship with someone, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to trust that God is going to take us there. And how are we going to do that? Through invitation and challenge. Growth and comfort cannot coexist. If you're feeling real nice and comfortable, you're probably not growing. We need these times of being like, okay, what I just went through was really hard, and I need a little bit of time to rest and just be comfortable. And that's, yes, absolutely. But we also can't stay there, or we will grow stagnant. And so, to grow, you must be challenged. I personally find it's easier when somebody else challenges me. I'm way more likely to be like, oh, I can't disappoint that person. So yeah, I'm going to meet the deadline. I'm going to do, the thing, than be motivated by myself. Because I know me, I'm flaky. I'm not going to hold myself super accountable. It's like, oh, girl, like you're fine. Give yourself grace. That starts to get into an excuse too. And to grow, you have to meet that resistance, and that's what's uncomfortable. Right? You go to the gym, you're like, okay, I've been lifting, I don't lift much, 10 pounds. 10 pounds is where I'm at. I'm like, yeah, 10 pounds feels good. And if I stay at 10 pounds for my entire life, well, I'll be really, really good at lifting 10 pounds. But I'm not going to be able to lift more than that. But to jump up to 15 pounds, I'm like, oh, that's hard. I can no longer do my 15, whatever these are called, reps with my 10-pound weights to do, to jump up 5 more pounds. Like, oh, well, maybe I can only do 8. And that's okay. Because it's a challenge to look at yourself and see your flaws and see what needs to change and take the steps to grow. I'm part of a book club, and I like to say book club is the best club. And we only read self-development books. And each week we make an intention of something that we are going to work on. I'm not super great at following through on my intention. Remember, I already know myself, I'm flaky. But to show up to book club and be like, hey guys, so either, yeah, I did it, like, here we go, or no, I didn't do it this time. That second one hurts a little bit more than myself being like, oh, well, you can just try again. But sometimes I look at myself and all I see are the things that I don't like, that I want to change, that I want to grow through. Not saying that I don't like myself. I think I'm great. But I'm also incredibly aware of my flaws. And I think we fall into 2 categories where we are all very aware of what we need to work on, especially when you get that little voice of God in the back of your head being like, hey, so this thing that you're really comfortable with, we're actually going to change it. And we can't do it by ourselves. We need God to mold us, and we need the support of others to help us. I should have wrote this verse down, but I didn't. But it's like, God is the potter, and we are the clay. And so we have to let that happen. We have to let him chip away. It's like those marble statues. I should have put a picture of it. And I don't even remember the artist. But right, to make a marble statue, you need to like slowly chip away at it, right? And there's this one artist who does an amazing job of making these marble sculptures look soft. And he or she can just create these like really nice soft draperies and like where the skin touches other skin, and you're like, ooh, it doesn't look like marble. And that's what God does to us. He chips away. We don't like being chipped at, but he chips away long enough and you become soft. And so to get into these 2 aspects of discipleship, of invitation and challenge, we talked about relationship. You need to invite someone into relationship with you. The second key part is you need to challenge them to grow and change. Matthew and I go to a life group, usually every Monday. And we definitely focus more on the aspect of like walking through life together and bringing our challenges versus having it be like more of a formal Bible study. And it's great because we call each other out and be like, hey, you might need to work on this. Hey, I know you said that this is your goal, you're not doing it. You're not working towards it. And that's a hard spot to be on both sides, to have someone be like, hey, you said you were going to draw every day, and you're not. Like, how can I support you in that? It's also hard being that person, because again, we're afraid of offending each other, right? We like to be this warm, cozy, feel good. You don't have to, Matthew's shaking his head, get out of here. Warm, cozy, feel good people, right? It's uncomfortable to say to someone, hey, I see this in you, and I think you need to work on it. Because a lot of the time it touches on shame. And shame freaks people out, because it's scary. We're not comfortable with our shame, especially if we realize other people can see it. It's one thing to like sit with yourself and be like, oh, well, no one knows. No one knows that I have this shame about pick anything, doesn't matter. It could be coffee. I could be ashamed that I drink coffee every day. I'm not, but like, that's a low-key example where I'm not gonna, I don't think I'm gonna poke anyone's shame about coffee. Maybe I will, I don't know. And so to have someone point that out to you as well, people don't like that. And so oftentimes they'll lash out at you, they'll get mad at you, they'll get upset. If you're like me, you're just gonna cry. I cry very, very easily. Yes, right? All the time, doesn't matter. It's, a little bit matters, especially in conflict. I have such a fear of disappointing others and authority that when someone brings something to me like, hey, you're kind of falling short on this, I just crumble. And like my immediate reaction is tears. And oftentimes people will be like, oh, well, like crying's just a cop-out. It's a way that girls use to like get out of being in trouble. No, it's your nervous system freaking out, because your nervous system is like, oh, yeah. It's like, oh, I don't like this. Don't touch that. I don't know how to regulate that. And actually, here's my other rabbit trail, Dwayne. The really neat thing is that they did this study on tears. And at different points of emotion, when you cried, your tears showed up different under the microscope. So there is actual healing qualities in crying. Again, it's saw it under a slide, and they kind of look like little snowflakes. It's very cool. Or like little swigglies. So your tears of joy look different than your tears of grief, which are different than your tears of anger. So take comfort in that, and don't let people shame you for crying. And it's the hard things that make us better, and it's the hard things that are worth doing. Every year, I try and pick a word of the year. And for the last 5 years? 5 years. I've actually only ever picked 2, and I alternate. I alternate between show up and be bold. Because those are the 2 things that scare me the most. And because they're the things that scare me, they're the things worth doing. I just told that to somebody yesterday, and I had to eat my words because there's something that I'm afraid of doing, and I'm like, oh, Kazia Lynn, that means you need to do it. Kazia Lynn, get your ducks in a row and just do it. My middle name's Lynn. Anytime I was in trouble growing up, my mom would be like, Kazia Lynn. Oh, also, I told my mom to watch this, so hi, Mama. Maybe you're watching. Now everyone knows that when you got mad at me, you would call me Kazia Lynn. But now I do it to myself, and I'm at work, and I do it all the time, and I'm like, Kazia Lynn, get your stuff together. You're making a mess. You're dumping milk jugs all over the place. Ooh, that's very nice. I like that. There you go. Deborah Ann just said, and you're speaking beauty over yourself. That's also important, is like your words have power. The way you talk to yourself, inside voice, outside voice, becomes your inner monologue. So be kind to yourself. And so back to doing hard things and things that are worth doing. At a dance workshop that I went to over Labor Day weekend down in Vancouver, which is the best thing ever. I love it so much. There's this instructor who has been dancing every single day for the last 40 years. And he calls it putting time in the woodshed. And again, it's like putting in the reps of, okay, every day I'm going to do a little bit of dancing. And they say dancing keeps you young. You look at this man, you believe it. We all thought that he was 20 years younger than he was. So the real moral of this is dance. No, the real moral is put in the time in the woodshed and do your reps. To go back to my dancing analogy, when you take time to get familiar with the music in private and like working out the steps and you're like, I'm gonna hit this beat here. If you do it in private, you will do it in public without thinking about it because the music will just call it out of you. So when you spend time with God in the woodshed and spend time in His Word, it'll just come out of you. It's an outpouring of your life. And you see that in anything you do, right? Matthew's super into Lego. The amount of times that Lego comes up, well, actually probably not as much as dancing does for me, but Jason and coffee, Jason brings up coffee all the time, right? So the things that are important to you show up in your life. So if spending time with God is important to you, it'll show up in your life. When you are immersed in your faith, it will come out as a natural byproduct to pour into others. The last workshop that I just went to in Victoria, which again, fantastic, love the ocean. If I didn't have a class right after, I would have gone for a swim. A similar topic came up of like, you gotta put in the reps. And the instructor said, listen to the music, feel it, and let Ella count you in. She's got you, she will count you in. So we need to listen to God's voice and do what it says, and let God count you in. His timing is way better than your timing. Ella's timing is better than my timing, Ella Fitzgerald. And so why am I trying to place my own timing when God's timing is better? Oh, yeah, on that. I'm actually really bad at this. Half the time, I'm like, I don't know if that's God. I think that's just me. I'm just not going to do kind of what I'm thinking because, like, I'm kind of not all here all the time. And then in retrospect, I'm like, oh, no, that actually was God. And I need to stop doubting that. So when I pray, I always ask God to make Him incredibly obvious because I can be incredibly dumb. I'm like, God, you need to be bigger than my dumbness. So how do we do it? How do we disciple others? Jesus took people on an experience and educated them along the way. And we kind of need to do the same thing. It's totally great to sit down and like study together. And yes, that in itself is an experience. But it's a different experience than going out and doing something together. You also can't take an experience away from somebody. And so Jesus pulled people from the fishing boats. He told them to leave their families behind and come with him, that he would teach them to be fishers of men. And how crazy must that have sounded? To be like some scruffy guy on the shore and be like, hey, like, I know you've got like a pretty decent gig going on here with fishing, but I have something better for you and I need you to leave all this behind and come with me. And they did, and they had many experiences that proved that going with Jesus was the right call. And so one of my experiences was I was 16. A lot happened when I was 16. I was at a conference in Vancouver. My homeroom group was reading the Do Hard Things devotional by authors that I cannot remember. But they were speaking in Vancouver, and we had the opportunity to go and see them. And it was incredible. And it was also the difference between reading this book in my homeroom and going out with a very large group of people to experience something bigger than us. And no one can take that away. So up until that point in my life, I knew about God, I knew about Jesus. My grandparents were Catholic, so we did Catholic Easter and Christmas. I went to the Catholic elementary school, and I was in my grade 1 class where we were all sitting on the floor, and my teacher had this like little like felt board on the classroom wall, and we had these little like the felt creatures, right? And so she was telling us about Jesus leaving the 99 sheep to go after the one. And that stuck with me at 6 years old, that there is a God out there who loves me so much that he is going to leave everyone behind and come after me. And at 6, I don't really understand what that means, but I think it's pretty cool to just have that inherent love. And that stuck with me. So we're going to also say, like, big credit to my grandparents for praying for us. And anytime we would stay at their house, we would have apple and peanut butter little sandwiches. I'm gonna put this down. So my grandma would take a big green Granny Smith apple, and she'd peel it. And then she would cut all these like tiny little slivers of peanut butter and make tiny little sandwiches. Looking back, I'm like, holy smokes, Grandma, like that was a lot of effort. To this day, though, that's still how I eat Granny Smith apples. Only I don't spread them, I just like dunk them in the peanut butter jar. The difference between when you're 7 and when you're 30. But I had that prayer on my life from a very young age. And my brother did too. He's off doing whatever. We don't know what he's doing. He's open to things, but my experience was very different than his experience. And so I ended up going to a Christian high school. I dealt a lot with panic attacks and anxiety, and it manifested in the form of like gut issues that I'm still dealing with. And my doctor was just like, "Oh, you're fine. Like, don't worry about it." Great GP. She was actually lovely, but not helpful. And so I never really figured out what was going on until I was in my high school counselor, and he's like, Kazia, like I'm pretty sure what you're dealing with is anxiety. And I went from a very small, right? It's the Catholic school. It's small. There was 100 kids in that entire school, to Kolomice, which was the much larger high school of 900-ish for the whole school. 900. So that's super overwhelming. And I could not deal with it. So my parents swapped me from the public school to the Christian school. Again, kind of a key difference between me and my brother is he ended up staying in the public high school when it was time for him to go to high school. But it was because I made this change to go to the Christian high school that I got to go on this experience in Vancouver. And sitting in that red chair with those the weird black scritchy armrests, Lance knows what I'm talking about, Matthew doesn't. I felt the most overwhelming, raw sense of being seen for the first time in my entire life, and no one can take that away from me. Amen. And if you don't give people the opportunity to have these experiences, how else are they also supposed to feel the raw, overwhelming sense of being seen and loved by God that someone also didn't explain to me? I can't explain to you how that happened or why I felt that way or even how it felt, other than it's kind of as if you were peeling ginger and you have that really nice juicy ginger feel. Well, that was me. I was the ginger being shredded. That's not great. Don't use that analogy. But my point is that we can't create that experience. No one could sit me down and be like, Kazia, this is how you're gonna feel. But they can take me to the place where I have the opportunity to feel that way. And so we are called to ministry, not programs. I, like I said, was a youth group kid, and I would show up, basically every Friday because that's where all my friends were. And it was a good time, and, they were going to feed us some kind of snack. We were going to play a game or three, or, throw tape balls at each other, or, muck around and just have fun. But of all of those nights, realistically, I didn't really encounter God. I wasn't really ministered to. It wasn't until Amanda came through and was like, hey guys, we're gonna do this together. Otherwise, you're just a bunch of teenagers running around at a corn maze throwing corn at each other. True story. I was not a corn thrower, nor was I ever hit with corn, but one of my friends was, and it was kind of funny. And I'm not discrediting these programs. They are excellent. We need these for kids to show up and hang out, and that's why Teen Scene does so amazing, and why Thursday nights Matthew has the kids running around, and these are good things. I'm not saying that they're not important, but I am saying it's not really ministry. Yes, of course, God can take these moments and work through people. God doesn't need us. He showed up as a burning bush. He doesn't need us to present him to others. He will show up that way. But really, they're more of a tool than an actual experience, for lack of better words. And so Jesus brought these men on an experience and he taught them. So how do we learn? We all learn differently. Typically, we all learn best through these three key things. We have knowledge, investment, and access. So put it in a different way, you learn in a classroom. Through apprenticeship, right? You work one-on-one with someone. And then immersion. You're just surrounded by it. A really great thing is thinking about language. I took French from kindergarten to grade 10. I cannot speak a lick of French. So I had all of that classroom experience, but I had no apprenticeship. No one tutored me. I had no one to practice speaking French to. And I never went anywhere that people spoke French. And so we all know, easiest way to learn a language is you learn about it, Duolingo, in a classroom, whatever. You work with someone who can speak the language. And then if you're lucky, you get to go somewhere where they do speak the language. And you can, practice in the real world and have people make fun of you for your real bad accent. Yeah. And so as you invite people into your world and give them access to your life and invest in them, you also kind of need to remember, am I including these three things? Am I just giving them head knowledge? Am I just being hey, here's the Bible verse that we're memorizing this week, see you later? Or are we talking about, okay, well, what does this actually mean, and how does it show up in your life? And so how do we know if our discipleship is working? You'll see it at the head level. You'll have someone be hey, so I was reading this the other day, and this really stood out to me. I actually had this happen at our life group where I was reading Jonah, and I've read it before. I wasn't expecting to get anything new out of it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have never related to someone so much in the Bible in my entire life. Am I Jonah? Am I afraid of God that I'm running away and yet crying out to God that I am so angry that I could die? How, of all the people in the Bible, am I like Jonah? And it was a little bit of a result of being surrounded by my friends who I am very blessed to have a lot of friends who are Christian. And so it's nice to have that atmosphere where they are challenging me of hey, what's going on in your life? And for me to go to them and be hey, I know it's 11:30 at night and you all are sleeping. Actually not, Blake's working night shift. And send them this message of I cannot believe that I relate to the man who got eaten by a fish. And so you'll see that. You'll have someone come questioning and be hey, I was reading this. What do you think? What do you think it means that I relate to the man who was eaten by a fish? You'll see it at the heart level. Whoever you're working with will start praying more, or journaling, you'll see a little bit more surrender in their life of like, oh, I feel like I kind of need to give this up. Can you help me give it up? Do I bring this up? Yeah, I do. And you'll also see it at the hand level of like physically things are changing. Maybe they're serving more. Maybe they're being a little more extra generous. They're doing some sort of outreach, right? Maybe they're showing up and, they've never stayed for cleaning up at the potluck. And this time they're like, oh, actually, like, I'm going to do the dishes this time. Or I'm going to help carry things out so that Cindy doesn't have to. It's actually to spend just like 30 seconds on generosity. I was listening to a book by Craig Rochelle, and he was saying that when he goes out, he likes to tip a little extra. Not because he's trying to show off, or even that he is like playing into this whole value of the tip system that like really should change, but we're not going to go there. He's just being a little extra generous because he knows the extra $5 that he gives the waitress means way more to her than it does to him. And so we have all these things, we're seeing them kind of like play out in people. And so we talked earlier about we measure what we value. And so here is a nice little new scorecard of like, how do we measure discipleship? And so we have salvation, how many people are being saved, how many people are being baptized, are the vehicles of discipleship growing? So like small groups, prayer meetings, etc. Right, how cool would it be on a Sunday morning? I'm assuming this open policy door here of like, how many people show up and pray before church? How cool would that be to be like, oh, you know what, actually we can no longer fit in that little prayer room. We now need to be out in the sanctuary praying. Or same thing on the ladies' prayer team. How cool would that be to see that grow? Or start a men's prayer team. How many things are these growing is a way to measure how discipleship is working. It kind of feeds into that of how many leaders are you building? Right, to run these things, you need people to lead them. So the two kind of feed into each other. As you disciple someone, hopefully they grow up into a position of leadership, which Amanda did to me. She was like, hey, Kazia, we need someone to run Sunday school. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I guess so. She gave me the little nursery kid, so it wasn't too bad. We just read a book and colored, and the crazy thing, Matthew's cousin, she was in my Sunday school class, and she was, 3? Now this girl is 15, taller than me. It's just wild. It's wild. And anyways. But she did that. She worked on me. She put me in a position of leadership. And ever since then, I have reluctantly done Sunday school on and off for many years. I say reluctantly, don't get me wrong. I like kids. I like kids one-on-one. I do not like wrangling them. At one point when I was very first out of high school, I'm like, I want to be a teacher. My teachers are so important to me. I want to have that level of impact on someone's life. Turns out you have to like working with kids to be a teacher. So saved myself, didn't go get my degree in teaching, thank goodness. But key point. But because these two feed into each other, where'd they go? Yeah, what vehicle are they using, right? What are your leaders doing? Put them in their strengths. Don't make the person who can only play 4 chords lead worship. Don't put the person who doesn't like cooking in charge of your kitchen. Put people where their strengths are. We talked about prayer meeting attendance, talked about people serving. These are all things that you will see as people come up into their discipleship. So a little bit about discipleship culture itself. We've already talked about the vehicle, right? You need somewhere for people to go. Access. How easy is it for them to get to that vehicle? I love the fact that there is a women's prayer group here. But on, 1 o'clock or whatever it is on a Tuesday, I'm not making it. I'm not driving out from Kamloops to do that. But it works for the people here. And so, is there a playing around of like, what is a good time to do this? We hold our dance classes on a Wednesday night because it's in the middle of the week. More people are going to be able to make it. And we're allowing that access to happen. And then your language is also important. Language creates culture. You can see it today even in the different generations. Like, okay, I work with a lot of young people. I don't understand half the stuff that comes out of their mouths. I had to have someone explain it to me, and no, I don't get it. There's too much. But they create a different culture at work than it was, 3 years ago when we had more people roughly my age, solely because of language. And so we actually use that at work. I'm still not great at it, but because I still call customers, but our new manager, who's delightful, likes to call customers guests. And by changing the slight word from customer to guest, changes their experience. Because now we're welcoming them into our space to serve them as our guest. Instead of a customer coming in being like, oh, well, yeah, sure, here's the thing that you're buying. But it's different. It's subtle, but it's different. And at dance, we traditionally, men led, women followed. There's been a move away from that. Not just like right now, but in Lindy Hop itself, it was very fluid. Anyone can lead, anyone can follow. And we do that. That's how we address the classroom of like, follows over here, leads over here. And it creates an inclusive culture. And so we do all these things, and we're like, okay, now I kind of know what I'm doing. I know what I'm measuring. And it's nice to have these things that we measure because it gives us a little bit of a win. It's much easier to be like, oh, I've checked a box, like I'm feeling kind of good, rather than, oh my gosh, the finish line is so far in that way. I don't know what I'm doing. It's too long. It's easy to get discouraged when like your mark is too far away. And so we need these little short-term wins of like, oh yes, we had a new kid show up at youth group. Oh, we have a couple new members at church. Oh, my friend who I have been praying for the last 30 years is finally asking me a question. These are little wins that we can track and just remind ourselves of like what we're doing is worth it. And even if those don't happen, success is in your obedience. Again, we're not called to the outcome. I am never going to change how someone lives their life. I'm just not. It's out of my control. My win comes through walking in obedience of God, of listening to that little voice of saying, hey, like you should say this. Or hey, like go pay for that person's lunch. Hey, show up here. I don't know why I'm here, but like just go be there. Because your obedience creates opportunities for God. How often do we hear these stories of someone being like, oh, like I didn't know, like I don't know if God exists. So I was saying, hey God, if you're real, like let someone do X, Y, Z. Let someone say this to me. Right? We hear those stories, mostly on the internet, because that's, the joys of the internet. But we don't know what's going to happen through our obedience. Right? So he appeared to Moses as a burning bush, and he can reach people without you, but we are also an important part of his plan. And so it's important that we walk in obedience and just see what happens. So, yeah, why do we do this? For obedience. Something the speaker, whose name I don't remember, said was, what is the Holy Spirit saying to you and what are you doing about it? So, who do we disciple? The people who are hungry, those who are looking for something more or bigger than themselves, I should have wrote the stats down, but one of the other keynote speakers said that the people of the younger generation today want something bigger than themselves. They're looking for it. And it's not even that people are walking away from Jesus or like rejecting that culture. They're actually just ignorant to it. Right? I had grandparents who took me to a Catholic church. Parents aren't bringing their kids to church anymore. For pick whatever reason, I don't know, I don't have kids. But they're not showing up. And so kids aren't even being like, oh, like, that's so weird, why do you believe that? They just don't get it. So you can't assume that there's any sort of knowledge about God in their lives. So the people who are hungry will also lead into the people who question things. Matthew was a bit of a questioner, I believe. A little bit of a skeptic, a little bit of a prove it, make it happen. The annoying thing is that the questions are usually like the pain in the butt because they're not going to accept what you say at face value. I'm a face value person. You tell me something and I'll be like, oh yeah, like that makes sense. Or like, good for you. I'm not really gonna push you of like, why do you feel that? But Matthew probably will. Jason probably will. You want to disciple the teachable, people who are curious, who are humble. It takes humility to learn. You can't really show up somewhere and be like, hey, I'm going to learn this new thing if you don't have the humility to be like, oh, I actually don't know anything about this. Risk takers. There's a reason why Jesus sought after the fishermen. Every single day they would risk their lives in a boat for their families. It was a very dangerous profession to have. It still is. Have you seen those crazy crab fishing stuff? No, terrifying. But he also chose them because they were already used to abandoning themselves for something else, for something bigger than they were. So easy transition, right? I'm going to give my life, potentially to the ocean, or am I going to give my life to Jesus? We also want the committed and the hard workers. They are the people who are just going to keep showing up no matter how difficult it gets. I think out of all of these people, in my life, I have the most committed and hardworking people. I don't know why. They just happen to be all of my friends who are like, yeah, we're just going to grind. Doesn't matter how hard it is. We're going to get stuff done. Which is funny because I flip-flop between that. I kind of actually take that back. You throw a paintbrush in my hand, I'll get it done. And so we have these people in our life. I don't know how hard you have to look for them. A couple conversations of being like, hey, like test the waters a little bit. Hey, are you interested in this? Hey, I know you're kind of new to your faith. Do you want someone to walk with you through this and like teach you more? The important thing is to show up and actually commit to doing that. Otherwise, you're just going to kind of burn those bridges. Another part that's important to discipling is that you empower them. And to empower someone means that you're actually giving them in a position of where they could fail. It's not bringing them somewhere and being like, hey, here's the exact plan that we're going to follow. Feel free, be empowered to do it, because they're just going to follow your instructions, and they're not going to have the opportunity to fail and to learn something. And we learn more through failure than we do through success, which is hard because failure is scary, so we don't want to fail. And so it turns into this loop of where you really do need someone behind you and be like, hey, it's okay if you fail. Like, I've got you. We're here for you. God's got you. I already talked about that. Yeah, so we allow our dance classes to failure, right? We tell them to train wreck it. If you fail, we'll figure it out. It's kind of the same way. Hey, go try this, whatever. If you fail, we'll figure it out. We'll try again. We'll figure out what went wrong and why it didn't work. And people will surprise you if you give them the opportunity to. If you're too busy not letting someone try because it's just easier to do it yourself, or you're trying to protect them from failure, you're not doing yourself or them any favors because they're just going to become dependent on you. And man, I tell you, if I was still dependent on Amanda, we would be having a really hard time because she lives in Tumbler Ridge. And how hard would it be for me to call her every single day and be like, Amanda, I don't know what I'm doing. What do you think I should do? How do I solve this problem? And you avoid that by giving people the opportunity to fail. And know that they can still come to you, but that they do have the ability to go out and try things on their own. And so you can do this, and you should do this with other people. Also, let them do it differently than you. I think a lot of times we're like, oh, but they're not going to do it my way. That was something that got said a lot in my house growing up, like, oh, it's my way or the highway. It's my roof. If you don't like it, too bad. And so for a little while, particularly when I first moved away from Williams Lake, half the stuff that came out of my mouth, I'm like, oh, that's my mom. My mom's coming out of my mouth right now. And it was weird. Not that I had overbearing parents. They were very relaxed. They were very relaxed. We were not told no a lot. To be fair, we grew up out of city limits, and what are we gonna do? Go throw sticks at each other in the forest? That's what we did do. Yes. But even just that stepping away of getting out from underneath my parents, their influence was still there. It's funny, over the summer I went and visited my dad, and we're sitting in the backyard, and I look over at him, and we are sitting in the exact same position of both on our lawn chair, both legs crossed, both hands on the lap, thumbs over here, eyes closed. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, that happens. And then we go and visit my aunt down in Nanaimo, and she goes, Kazia, it's so bizarre. I feel like I'm sitting with your mom. And so that was my third bunny rabbit. And so you have to empower people, let them experiment, see what happens. Know that your way is not always the right way. It's the right way for you, but it's not the right way for somebody else to do something. And so you take that and you remind yourself of okay, I can't give them an experience. I can't lead them to a moment, but I can create an environment where that can happen. And that's all I have to say, and I don't know how to end things, so thank you. Oh, sure. Father, thank you so much for today. Thank you for the opportunities that we all have here with you and with each other, and that you have put a call on our life to reach those around us, and that even when we are afraid, or when we're so angry that we could just die, that you are there to give us rest and to take our burden and to walk with us, knowing that you don't need us, but we need you. And bless all the food that was made today, the hands that made it, the hands that are going to serve it, and for the youth that are here to clean up after us and have lunch with us and experience better things with you. And with that, amen.